Marley was dead to begin with. There was no doubt about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon anything his name he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was the sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up about the event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, old Scrooge was. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and on his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw out 1 degree at Christmas. Nobody ever stopped him on the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up court. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, wanting all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones call nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, and foggy outside. It had just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, so that he might keep an eye on his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like 1 coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. Therefore, the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" "Christmas a humbug, Uncle!" said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What right have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said, "Bah! Humbug!" "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew.
"What else can I be," returned the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? A Merry Christmas! Out upon a Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding, and buried with a stake of holly through his heart he should."
"Uncle!" pleaded the nephew.
"Nephew!" returned the uncle sternly. "Keep Christmas in your way, and let me keep it in mine."
"Keep it?" repeated Scrooge's nephew.
"But you don't keep it!" "Let me leave it alone, then," said Scrooge. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you."
"There are many things from which I've profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time as a kind, forgiving, charitable time." The only time of the year when men and women open up their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people beneath them as fellow passengers to the grave. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has, and it will do me good, and I say, God bless it! The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded.
Let me hear another sound out of you, said Scrooge, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder why you don't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
I'll see you in hell first,
said Scrooge angrily. But why? Cried Scrooge's nephew. Why?
Why did you get married?
Said Scrooge. Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love?
Growled Scrooge.
That is the only thing more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon.
Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon,
said Scrooge. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a part of. But I have made the trial in honour of Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humour to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, uncle.
Good afternoon,
said Scrooge. And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon,
said Scrooge. His nephew left the room, notwithstanding. He stopped at the door to bestow greetings of the season, to which the clerk returned cordially.
There's another fellow,
said Scrooge, who overheard them.
My clerk with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family talking about a Merry Christmas. Now retire to Bedlam.
This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood in Scrooge's office, with their hats off. They had books and papers in their hands, and both bowed to him.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe,
said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list.
Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years.
Mr. We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner,
said one of the gentlemen, preparing his credentials. At the word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head, handing the credentials back.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge,
said one of the gentlemen, picking up a pen,
it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities and common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
asked Scrooge.
Plenty of prisons,
said the gentleman, laying down the pen.
And the union workhouses?
demanded Scrooge.
Are they still in operation?
They are, still,
returned the gentleman.
I wish I could say they were not.
Oh, I thought something had occurred to stop them of their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude,
returned the gentleman,
some of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and means of warmth. We chose this time because it is a time when want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing,
Scrooge replied.
Oh, you wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I want, gentlemen, this is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry either. I help support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that.
But you might know it,
observed the gentleman.
It's not my business,
Scrooge returned.
It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the two gentlemen left. Scrooge resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat.
"You'll let all day tomorrow, I suppose?"
said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir."
"It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair either. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound."
The clerk smiled faintly.
"And yet," said Scrooge, "you'd think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work."
The clerk observed that it was only once a year.
"A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December,"
said Scrooge, buttoning his great coat to the chin.
"But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning."
The clerk promised he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. Scrooge lived all alone in an old house. The yard was very dark and scary that night, and when Scrooge attempted to unlock the door, he had the feeling that he saw old Marley's face in the knocker. It seemed rather spooky, but Scrooge was not frightened easily.
"Humbug,"
he said as he opened the door and walked in. But before he shut the heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that he was all right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and double-locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against his surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and sat down before the fire. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least extension of warmth from a handful of fuel. As he threw his head into his chair, his glance rested on a bell. It was with great astonishment that the bell began to swing. It swung so softly that it barely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This may have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed like an hour. The bells finished as they had started, together. Suddenly, Scrooge heard a noise, deep, down below, as if somebody were dragging a heavy chain. The noise came nearer and nearer, and then Scrooge saw a ghost come straight through the door. Upon its coming in, the flame leapt up. It was Marley's ghost, and his chains were long. They were made of cash boxes, keys, and heavy purses. His body was transparent, and though he looked through him, he did not believe the ghost.
"How now?"
Said Scrooge.
"What do you want from me?"
"Much,"
Marley's ghost said.
"Who are you?"
"Ask me who I was."
"Who are you then?"
said Scrooge, raising his voice.
"In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley."
Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtful at him.
"I can."
"Do it then."
Much to Scrooge's astonishment, the ghost did as requested, and sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he were used to it.
"You don't believe in me?"
The ghost observed.
"I don't,"
Scrooge said.
"Why do you doubt your senses?"
"Because,"
said Scrooge,
"a little thing can make them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. Why, there's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are."
At this the spirit raised a frightful cry, and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. He fell on his knees and clasped his hands before its face.
"Mercy," he said, "dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?"
"Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?"
"I do, I must,
But why do the spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required that if a man does not walk among his fellow men, that he is condemned to do so in death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe is me! And witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness.
Again the spectre raised a cry, and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy hands.
You are fettered, said Scrooge. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I gauded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?
Scrooge trembled more and more.
Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have laboured on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Jacob, oh Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I've none to give. It comes from other regions. Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. Very little is more all permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole. A weary journey lies before me.
7 years dead, mused Scrooge.
Been travelling all the time?
The whole time,
said the ghost.
No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse. Oh, captive bound, double-ironed, cried the phantom, not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunity misused. Oh, such was I, he cried. At this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no homes to which its light would have conducted me?
Scrooge was dismayed to hear that the spectre was going at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly.
Hear me, said the ghost. My time is nearly gone.
I will, said Scrooge, but please don't be hard upon me. Be preachy upon me, Jacob.
That is no light part of my penance,
pursued the ghost.
I am here tonight to warn you that you may yet have a chance and hope of escaping my fate.
Thank you, my friend, said Scrooge.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
I think I'd rather not,
replied Scrooge to the ghost.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Scrooge replied to this warning.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second from the night, at the same hour on the next night. The third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us.
The spectre backed toward the window, with the window opening a bit with each step, until it was wide open, and he floated out into the bleak night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, moaning as they went. Each of them wore chains like Marley's ghost, the misery all too clear on their ghostly countenances. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, the bolts undisturbed.
Humbug,
he tried to say, but stopped with the first syllable. And being much in need of repose after the fatigues of the evening's visitor, he fell on his bed without undressing, and was asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that he could barely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He listened for the church bells as they struck the 4 quarters. Then the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, and then stopped. 12? It was 2:30 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. He tried to correct his clock, but it kept repeating to 12 beats. He went to bed again and thought and thought and thought, over and over, but could make nothing of it. But Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. He decided he must have dreamed the spectre's visit, and resolved to lie awake past the warning of the 1 o'clock visitation of the first ghost. When the clock chimed through the quarter hours, he began to relax, thinking that triumphantly that he had avoided it. On the chime of 1, light flashed up in the room instantly, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside by a hand. Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. And the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright jet of light, by which all things was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm.
"Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?"
asked Scrooge. I am. The voice was soft and gentle, but low, as if instead of being so close beside him, it were at a distance.
"Who and what are you?"
Scrooge demanded. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
"Long past?"
inquired Scrooge. No, your past. Scrooge then made bold to inquire what business brought him there. Your welfare, said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, Your reclamation, then. Take heed. It put out its strong hand as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm. Rise, and walk with me. It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes, but the grasp was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made him towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication. I am mortal, said Scrooge, and liable to fall. Bear but a touch of my hand there, said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand. The city vanished entirely. Good heaven, said Scrooge, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. Your lip is trembling, said the ghost, and what is that upon your cheek? Scrooge muttered, with an unusual catching in its voice, and begged the ghost to lead him where he would. You recollect where this was? Inquired the spirit. Remember it? Cried Scrooge with fervour. I could walk it blindfold. Strange to have forgotten it for so many years, observed the ghost. Let us go on. They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country JJ and cars driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music, the crisp air laughed to hear it. "These are but shadows of things that have been," said the ghost. "They have no consciousness of us." "The school is not quite deserted," said the ghost. "A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still." Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, soon approached a mansion of dull red brick, with little weathercock-surmounted cupola on the roof, and a bell hanging on it. It was a large house, but one of broken fortunes, with walls damp and mossy, windows broken, and gates decayed. Entering the dreary hall and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his old forgotten self as had used to be. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Then, with a rapidity of transition very foreign to his usual character, he said, in pity for his former self, "Poor boy," and cried again. "I wish," Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pocket and looking about him, after drying his eyes with his cuff.
"But it's too late now."
"What is the matter?" asked the spirit.
"Nothing,"
said Scrooge.
"Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something. That's all."
The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved its hand, saying as it did so, "Let us see another Christmas." Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. He remembered everything that happened, how he was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in, and putting her arms about his neck, and often kissing him, addressed him as "Dear, dear brother." "I've come to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, clasping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. "To bring you home, home, home!" "Home, little Fan?" returned the boy. "Yes," said the child, brimful of glee. "Home for good and all. Home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said yes. You should, and he sat me in a coach to bring you, and you ought to be a man," said the child, opening her eyes, "and I'll never to come back here. But first, we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world." "You are quite a woman, little Fan," exclaimed the boy. She clapped her tiny hands and laughed, trying to reach up to hug him, but being so tiny, he had to reach down to her. The headmaster had the boys bring down his trunk to be loaded on top of the chaise. "Always a delicate creature," said the ghost, "but she had a large heart."
"So she had," cried Scrooge. "You're right. I will not gainsay it, spirit. God forbid."
"She died a woman," said the ghost, "and had, as I think, children."
"One child,"
Scrooge returned. "True," said the ghost. "Your nephew." Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind and answered briefly, "Yes." The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
"Know it?" said Scrooge. "I was apprenticed here."
They went in, at sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried with great excitement,
"Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again!"
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7.
He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice,
"Yo-ho there, Ebenezer! Dick!"
Scrooge's former self, now a grown young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
"Dick Wilkins, to be sure."
"Dick Wilkins?"
said Scrooge the ghost.
"Yo-ho, my boys!" said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let us have the shutters up before a man can say Jack Robinson."
The fellows charged into the street and had the shutters up into their places before you could count to 12.
"Hilly-ho!"
cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from his desk with wonderful agility.
"Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here."
In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile, followed by her 3 Miss Fezziwigs, along with all the men and women employed in the business. In came the cook, the milkman, the boy from over the way. The dancing and merrymaking proceeded as the fiddler played almost non-stop, only stopping for a swig of porter supplied by Fezziwig. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their places at the door to wish everyone who came a Merry Christmas. During this whole time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude."
"Small?"
echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the 2 apprentices who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and when he had done so, said,
"Why, is it not?
He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?"
It isn't that,"
said Scrooge, heated by the remark.
"It isn't that, spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a trial. Say that his power lies in word, and looks in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune."
He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. "What is the matter?"
"Nothing particular,"
said Scrooge. "Something, I think," the ghost insisted.
"No,"
said Scrooge.
"No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all."
Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. "My time grows short," observed the spirit. "Quick." Even though Scrooge couldn't see anything changing, he suddenly saw himself as an older man, in the prime of his life. His face had not yet the harsh and frigid line of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. "It matters little," she said softly, "to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in the time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to cause grief."
"What idol has displaced you?" he rejoined.
"A golden one."
This is the even-handed dealing of the world, he said. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty. And there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
"You fear the world too much," she answered gently. "All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I've seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not?"
"What then?" he retorted. "Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you."
She shook her head.
"Am I?"
"Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man."
"I was a boy,"
he said impatiently. "Your own feeling tells you that you were not what you are." She returned. "I am. That which promised happiness when we were in one heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you."
"Have I ever sought release?"
"In words? No, never."
"In what, then?"
"In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us," said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him, "tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?" "Oh, no." He was about to speak, but she resumed. "You may. The memory of what is past half makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen." She left him, and they parted.
"Spirit," said Scrooge, "show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight in torture me?"
"One shadow more," exclaimed the ghost.
"No more," cried Scrooge. "No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more."
But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like that last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge, in his agitated state of mind, could count, and, unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she, with laughing face and plundered dress, that was borne towards it the centre of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy. One by one the child finally climbed the stairs to bed, and so the noise subsided. Now Scrooge looked upon more attentively than ever, when the master of the house sat down at his own fireside with his wife and daughter,
Belle,
said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile.
I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Who was it?
Guess.
How can I don't know, she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. Mr. Scrooge!
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up and he had a candle inside, I could hardly help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there we sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirit, said Scrooge in a broken voice, remove me from this place. I told you that these were shadows of the things that have been, said the ghost, that they are what they are, so not blame me.
Remove me, Scrooge exclaimed. I cannot bear it.
He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face, in which some strange way there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it.
Leave me, take me back, haunt me alone longer.
In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over high, he seized the extinguisher cap and with a sudden action pressed it down upon his head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form, but the light could not be hidden. It steamed in an unbroken flood upon the ground beneath it. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave that cap a parting squeeze in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Awakening in the middle of the night of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he had been restored to consciousness in the right nick of time, for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But finding that he turned uncomfortable cold when he began to wander of his curtains, this new spectre would draw back. He put them every one aside with his own hands, and, lying down, established a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant, or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be at the very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, the strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. And such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney, as that dull petrification of a hearth had never been known in Scrooge's time or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season's gone. In an easy state upon a couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up to shed its light upon Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
"Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man!"
Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been, and thought the spirit's eyes were clear and kind. He did not like to meet them.
"I am the ghost of Christmas present,"
said the spirit.
"Look upon me."
Scrooge reverently did so.
"You have never seen the like of me before,"
said the spirit.
Never.
Scrooge made to answer it.
"Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young. My elder brothers born in these later years,"
pursued the phantom.
I don't think I have, said Scrooge. I am afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, spirit?
"More than 1,800,
said the ghost.
A tremendous family to provide for,
muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose.
Spirit,
Scrooge said submissively.
conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
touch my robe."
Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. All the trappings of Christmas, holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, sausages, pies, puddings, fruit, and punch, all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The ghost took Scrooge to Bob Cratchit's house, a very poor little dwelling. In the kitchen you could see Mrs. Cratchit preparing Christmas dinner. Her children were cheerfully running around.
Whatever has got your precious father, then? Said Mrs. Cratchit. And your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Here's Martha, mother,
said a girl, appearing as she spoke. Hurrah! Cried two other Cratchits.
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed her a dozen times as she removed her shawl and bonnet.
Sit by the fire and have a warm, Lord bless you, dear. No, there's father coming,
cried the two Cratchit children. Hide, Martha, hide! So Martha hid herself. Then the door opened and Bob Cratchit came in with Tiny Tim upon his shoulders. Tiny Tim bore a little crutch and held his limbs supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha?
Cried Bob Cratchit, looking around.
Not coming,
said Mrs. Cratchit.
Not coming? Not coming on Christmas Day?
Cried Mr. Cratchit. Martha didn't like to see her father disappointed, if only for a joke, so she came out prematurely from the closed door and ran into his arms.
How did little Tim do in church?
Asked Mrs. Cratchit.
As good as gold,
said Bob.
and better.
Somehow he gets off sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice became tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. Mrs. Cratchit told soon had the whole Christmas meal ready for the table. Everyone gathered around to share this goose and trimmings. Grace was said, and the Cratchits were exclaiming with admiration the mashed potatoes and applesauce. Then the Christmas pudding was served, warm from the steamer, with a little flame on top, courtesy of a small amount of lighted brandy. The table was cleared with the help of all, and Bob Cratchit was soon passing around glasses from a hot jug of mulled wine. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us all," which all the family echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child, and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, with an interest he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live."
"I see a vacant seat,"
replied the ghost,
"in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die."
"No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit, say he will be spared."
"If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race,"
returned the ghost,
"will find him here. What then? If he would be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population."
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief.
"Man," said the ghost, "if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus and where it is. Will you decide what man shall live, what man shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. O God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust."
Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling, cast his eyes upon the ground. But then he raised them speedily on hearing his own name. "Mr. Scrooge," said Bob. "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast."
"Founder of the feast, indeed," cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. "I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it."
"My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day."
"It should be on Christmas Day, I'm sure," said she, "on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fellow."
"My dear," was Bob's mild answer, "Christmas Day."
"I'll drink his health for you and for your sake in the days, not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year," she said. "He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt."
The children drank the toast after her, but there was no heartiness in it. But after a time, the balefulness passed, and the Cratchits were 10 times merrier than before. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. The clothes were scanty, but they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded and looked happier, yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, as though it were the burial place of giants. Down in the west, the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation for an instant. The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Scrooge to hold his robe, and passing on above the moor, sped whither. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself standing in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the spirit standing, smiling by his side. "Ha ha!" laughed Scrooge's nephew. "Ha ha ha!" The laugh was irresistibly contagious, and soon his niece, by marriage, joined in the hearty laughter, as did the assembled friends. "He said Christmas was a humbug as I live," cried Scrooge's nephew. "He believed it too." "More shame in it. More shame for him, Fred," said Scrooge's niece indignantly. "He's a comical old fellow," said Scrooge's nephew. "That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him." "I'm sure he is very rich, Fred," hinted Scrooge's niece. "At least you always tell me so." What of that, my dear?" said Scrooge's nephew. "His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he is never going to benefit us with it." "I've no patience with him," observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece's sisters and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. "Oh, I have," said Scrooge's nephew. "I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He won't lose much of a dinner." Scrooge's nephew continued. "I was going to say that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us, as I think that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions that he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but I can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there, in good temper, year after year, and saying, 'Uncle Scrooge, how are you?' it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50. That's something. I think I shook him yesterday." The gaiety continued, dancing, playing games, and singing songs. What a particular song was sounded, all the things the ghost of Christmas past had shown him, came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought if he might have listened to it often, years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of his life for his own happiness with his own hands. Scrooge wanted to stay, and continue in the merriment he had forgotten in life. But in a second it all faded, and Scrooge and the spirit were once again on their travels. They visited many homes, in many places. They saw sick people who were cheerful, people in foreign lands who were close at home, poor people who felt rich that day, all because of the Christmas spirit. Suddenly, Scrooge noticed something strange about the ghost. Two childlike figures were at the ghost's feet, hidden under his robe, a boy and a girl. But they looked odd and dreadful, like little monsters. Scrooge was startled and drew back, appalled.
"Spirit,
"Are they yours?" asked Scrooge. Could say no more.
"They are man's,"
Said the spirit, looking down upon them.
"and they cling to me, appalling from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased, deny it,"
cried the spirit, stretching out his hand towards the city.
Slander those who hear it ye. Admit it for your facetious purposes, and make it worse, and bide the end.
have they no refuge or resource?"
cried Scrooge.
Are there no prisons?
Said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words.
Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12 and the ghost of Christmas present disappeared. As the last stroke of 12 ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, behold a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground, towards him. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing visible save one outstretched hand.
Are you the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
Said Scrooge.
I fear you more than any other spirit.
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me the shadows of things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us.
Scrooge pursued.
Is that so, spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an infant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to the ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover.
Ghost of the future,
Scrooge exclaimed,
I fear you more than any spectre I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on, said Scrooge. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit.
Scrooge followed the phantom in the shadow of its dress. Which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city. Rather, the city seemed to spring about them. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen, observing that the hand was pointed to them. Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No,
Said a great fat man with a monstrous chin.
I don't know much about it, either way. Only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Inquired another.
Last night, I believe.
Why? What was the matter with him?
Asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box.
I thought he'd never die.
God knows,
Said the first with a yawn.
What has he done with his money?
Asked a red-faced gentleman.
I haven't heard.
Said the man with the large chin, yawning again.
Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know.
The pleasantry was received with a general laugh.
It's likely to be a very cheap funeral,
Said the same speaker.
for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make a party and volunteer?
I don't mind going if lunch is provided,
Observed the red-faced gentleman.
but I must be fed if I make one.
Another laugh.
Well, I am most disinterested among you, after all,
Said the first speaker.
for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But don't offer it to anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
Scrooge knew the men and looked to the spirit for an explanation. But the spirit was silent, just pointing his finger at two other men in a meeting. Scrooge knew them both as businessmen of well standing.
How are you?
Said one.
How are you?
Returned the other.
Well,
Said the first.
old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?
So I am told. Returned the second.
Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?
No, something else to think of.
Good morning.
Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first to be surprised that the spirit would attach such importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. As they wandered through the city, Scrooge looked in every corner to find his countenance among the busy multitudes that poured through the porch, but he saw nothing of himself. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, with his outstretched hand. The unseen eyes were looking at him keenly, made him shudder and feel very cold. The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated by the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing. But surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and sat him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out, as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand to her face. The colour hurts my eyes, but I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time. Past it rather, said Peter, but I think he walks a little slower than he used these last few evenings, mother. They were very quiet again. I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Very fast indeed, said mother. So have I, they all agreed. But he was light to carry, she resumed, intent upon her work. And his father loved him so that it was no trouble. And there was your father at the door. After having his tea, the Cratchit children got on his knees and laid, each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father. Don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful then, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He saw the work they had done upon the table, and praised them for their industry. They would be done long before Sunday. "Sunday? You went today then, Robert?" said his wife.
Yes, my dear. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child,
cried Robert. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set above, close to the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it. He kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened and went down again, quite happy. They drew around the fire and talked. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he scarcely had seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked a little down, inquired what had happened to distress him. On which, said Bob, "Before he is the most pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him, I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how you ever knew that, I don't know." "Knew what, my dear?" "That you were a good wife," said Bob. "Heartily sorry," he said. "If I can be of any service to you in any way," he said, giving me his card, "that's where I live. Pray come to me." It was almost as if he knew our Tiny Tim and felt us.
"Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how."
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before, though at a different time he thought, indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the results of men, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, though which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere.
The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away?
The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. Neither was the figure at the table, was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate, a churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name had now to learn lay underneath the ground. The phantom stood among the graves and pointed to one. He advanced toward it, trembling.
Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, said Scrooge, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadow of things that may be only?
Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if preserved in it, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus what you show with me.
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Am I that man who lay upon the bed?
He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again.
No! No, spirit! Oh, no!
The finger was still there.
Spirit,
he cried, tight clutching at its robe.
Hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this, if I have past all hope?
For the first time the hand appeared to shake.
Good spirit,
he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it.
Your nature it precedes me, and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life.
The kind hand trembled.
I will learn a Christmas in my heart, and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing in the stone.
In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in its entreaty, and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him, holding up his hands in a last prayer to save his fate reversed. He saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes! The bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in.
The spirits of all three shall strive within me, O Jacob Marley. Heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, O Jacob, on my knees.
Scrooge scrambled out of bed.
I don't know what to do,
cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath.
I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quiet as a baby. Never mind. I don't care.
The churches in the city were ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash! clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell. Oh, glorious, glorious!
What's today? Cried Scrooge,
as he threw upon the sash of his window.
Today?
Replied the boy.
Why, Christmas Day! It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Here, my fine fellow,
he called down from the window. Hello? Returned the boy.
Do you know the poulterers? In the next street but one, in the corner.
Scrooge inquired.
I should hope I did,
replied the boy.
An intelligent boy, said Scrooge. Do you know whether they have sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What, the one as big as me? He replied.
Yes, my buck, said Scrooge.
It's hanging there now, replied the boy.
It is. Go and buy it,
said Scrooge.
Walk up,
exclaimed the boy.
No, said Scrooge. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it.
Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling.
Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll give it to Bob Cratchit, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hand and splitting it with a laugh. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The knocker caught Scrooge's eye as he waited.
I shall love it as long as I live,
he said, patting it.
Hello, there's the turkey. How are you? A Merry Christmas. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
Scrooge chuckled as he ordered the cab. He chuckled as he paid the boy. And he chuckled when he paid for the turkey.
Merry Christmas.
He shed, which wasn't an easy task. He shaved, which wasn't an easy task, as his hands continued to tremble. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. Scrooge regarded every one he met with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humoured fellows said,
"Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you."
He had not gone far, when coming toward him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting house the day before and asked for a donation to the poor. It set a pang to his heart to think. It set a pang to his heart to think what this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it. Grasping the gentleman's hands, he wished him a Merry Christmas and asked if he would have the goodness. Here Scrooge whispered in his ear.
"Lord bless me!"
he exclaimed.
"Are you serious, my dear Scrooge?"
"If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you."
He went to the church, and looking at the families and children, decided to enter. Scrooge sang the old Christmas carols louder than anyone. In the afternoon, he turned towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock.
"Is your master at home, my dear?"
he asked the girl. "Yes, sir."
"Where is he, my love?"
said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress. I'll show you the way upstairs, if you please."
"Thank you. He knows me,"
said Scrooge, already on the dining room lock.
"I'll go in here, dear."
He turned it gently and sidled his face in, round the door. The table was spread out in great array.
"Fred,"
said Scrooge. "Why, bless my soul! Who's that?"
"It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?"
"Let him in! It is a mercy that he didn't shake his arm off. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness." Scrooge was at the office early the next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing that he had set his heart upon. And he did. Oh, yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1/4 past. No Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open so that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello?
Growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near he could feign it.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir, said Bob. I'm behind my time.
You are?
Repeated Scrooge.
Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir, pleaded Bob, appearing from the tent. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend, said Scrooge. I am not going to stand for this very thing any longer, and therefore,
he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again,
and therefore, I am about to raise your salary.
A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back.
A Merry Christmas, Bob. My good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary
and endeavour to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoky bishop, Bob. Make up the fire and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more, into Tiny Tim, who did not die. He was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people didn't have their fill of the laughter at the onset, and knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up all their eyes and grins, and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirit, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, as if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. The end.